feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college rule!
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. Just a couple of comics out here talking sports. And then who are we talking about today?
Today we've got Heisman Trophy winner
Yep.
and one of the best college head coaches in the history of the NCAA.
Well, before we started, I felt like you said it pretty accurate, where you're just like, this guy is college football.
Yeah.
Like, that's what this guy is. Talking Steve Spurrier today.
We got Steve Spurrier. Stephen Orr Spurrier, born April 20th, 1945, to Presbyterian minister Jay Graham and mom Marjorie there in Miami Beach, Florida, but moved around a lot as a kid.
Yeah, I saw that his dad just kept getting different jobs in different congregations. So they were like, before he was 12, I think they said he moved like 5 times.
Yeah.
Which is a lot.
It's a lot. But they end up settling near his mom's parents there in Johnson City, Tennessee, when he's 12. And with his older brother, Graham, just awesome at sports.
Yeah, that was what it's so interesting when you see these kids who are like 12 and you're like, no, he's going to be great at whatever sport.
Sometimes you see those kids and you're just like, well, they're going places.
Yep.
As long as they got a head on their shoulder, they're going places.
Exactly.
Like that weirdo who was scouting Schmitty back in the day.
Oh, man.
Sir, why do you? It's like in Little Giants when they're spying on him.
Yeah.
Freeze! Here comes Spurrier. So he was so good at baseball growing up, some of the local businesses asked his dad to coach his Little League team and sponsor the team.
Yep.
And I don't know if you read what his dad
The
said.
quote?
Yes,
That
go
was
for it.
that was my favorite
Dude.
quote from, because you get these quotes that are like, oh, that's cool. This quote from his dad is so great. Also to tell a bunch of little leaguers.
Yes,
so
it's perfect.
It's not like he's on. It's not like their college or even high school team. So his dad, which is the common saying for like little league or whatever, is I don't care if you win or lose. It's how you play the game. Mm-hmm. And then his dad would say, no, it matters if we win if we're keeping score. And then you're just like, yeah, that's a competitive father. That's something that I want right there.
I swear to God, it's like the biggest mixture of Coach Riley from Mighty Ducks and Ricky Bobby's dad.
Oh, yeah.
You ain't first, you're
You're
last.
last.
Well, you could be second.
Or
You could be third.
third.
You could be even fourth.
But if you're fifth, that means you're a never was.
Yes.
So,
I mean, shake and bake, right?
Oh, dude.
You're going to law school and getting all the DUIs. Like Gordon Bombay. So he's a 3-sport star in high school. He's good. He's amazing at all 3.
but I was going to say, in high school, the thing that kind of blew me away was it was more baseball, basketball, and he was the one being like, no, I want to play football.
Oh, yeah. He was all-state in all 3. He was undefeated as a pitcher.
Yep.
2 state titles. He was white chocolate as their point guard before white chocolate was a thing.
Yep.
Led him to a conference title. He had 22 points a game as a senior.
I know.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But he had said he loved football the most, and that's where he wanted to pursue. Yeah. He was a great passer, too, which at the time was pretty rare considering how often everyone ran the ball. He was a high school All-American as a senior and basically recruited by everybody except for one school in football.
And, well, I saw Tennessee was recruiting him for baseball.
Yeah, and basketball.
But like that was his thing where he was just like, no, those sports are done for me. I'm going to be a quarterback in football, and that's what he pursued.
Yeah. Florida head coach at the time, Ray Graves, his brother was the postmaster there in Knoxville.
Yep.
And basically started a relationship with Spurrier's family and kind of tried to get him to not go to UT. And what ended up happening is he liked the weather, he liked the campus, and he liked the coach. And we'll get back into his issues with Tennessee later.
Yeah.
As far as some tongue-in-cheek stuff that he does. But he wasn't promised a starting job or anything. He just was promised, we're going to pass more if you come here.
Well, it's such a different landscape that he wasn't even – so he was given opportunities to have scholarships to go to other colleges. That was not the case
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He literally was just like, I think you would fit into our offense. You don't have the starting spot, but I feel like you could work for it. And Steve was like, yeah, I'm in.
Oh, for sure. So in 1963, not allowed to play on varsity because
freshman
he's a
rules.
student athlete. The Baby Gators are pretty good, though.
Yeah.
They laid the smackdown on Georgia. And entering 1964, he's in a competition to be the starter with senior Tommy Shaw from the year before. And they're forced to alternate QBs because Spurrier can play.
Yeah, they split it, and you could see him just coming in as a sophomore because they would almost be like, this game's on the line, put Steve in. That's what it felt like, where he had a couple of like really good comebacks when he was a sophomore, and you could almost just see like, oh, he's going to be our quarterback the next 2 years.
Yeah, so that year in 64, basically they almost upset Alabama in Tuscaloosa when Joe Namath was the quarterback. They beat LSU in Baton Rouge that year, and they were a top 10 team. He was this conference's sophomore of the year.
Yeah.
So entering 65, he's the clear-cut number one guy.
Yep.
Finishes 9th in the Heisman that year. Was one of the first people who did the Gatorade tests.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read that.
In 65, so when he was a junior, they came in with Gatorade, and what he said after it, he just goes, I have no idea if that helped us or not. And it's such a great thing that Gatorade didn't want him to say, but he was just like, I don't know. I don't know what you want.
Should have pulled the idiocracy. It's got what thirsts crave.
Yeah.
Electrolytes. Brondo. So that year they finished 7-4. They make it to the Sugar Bowl.
They go to the Sugar Bowl.
They lose to Missouri, and I'll be deep in the cold, cold ground before I recognize Missouri.
But he was the first player to ever win MVP of the Sugar Bowl on a losing team, which that's where you see how good of a quarterback he was. I think he had like 340 yards passing.
Yeah.
So
which at that time is like 800 now.
That's what I mean. It's such a crazy thing that you don't really realize back then that everybody is running the whole time. So for him to have that much passing yard, you're just like, oh, damn.
Yeah, it's crazy. So 66, the senior season. This is quite a special one for Steve.
Yep.
I mean, at the time, if you're passing for almost 62%, that's pretty ridiculous with how, rudimentary the passing game was back in those days. Over 2,000 yards and 16 touchdowns. Florida's awesome this year. They go 9-2 and finish 11th in the UPI. Against Auburn that year on October 29th, he ran a 2-minute drill, and he waved off the place kicker to kick the field goal himself to win the game.
Which I love so much.
Oh, God.
It's such a great thing. It's just like, I can't trust you with this. I'm doing it.
Well, we've got that foreign exchange student who kicks barefoot. I think we've all had enough of that.
It's so good.
There was a gentleman from the Atlanta Constitution who said, blindfolded, with his back against the wall, with his hands tied behind him, Steve Spurrier would be the 2-point favorite at his own execution. So he's got that magic. He's got that late game magic to him. They lost to Georgia that year, which cost him, I think, the SEC title. And, he didn't let that one go, as we'll see later.
I was just going to say, we'll come back to that. But he did win the Heisman that year and was thought of as the number one quarterback going into the NFL this next year.
Yeah, I mean, they won the Orange Bowl. He's a hot commodity.
Yep.
And as we've discussed, so entering the 67 NFL, now NFL/AFL draft, because they have the common draft as the leagues have merged, but they're not together yet.
Yep.
A lot of the quarterback is fit. A lot of it is where you go and what the plan is for you. And he kind of got screwed over.
Yes.
In a way.
But then again, I feel like it almost shapes the kind of coach he is.
Oh, yeah.
So what happens is he goes 3rd overall to the 49ers, who traded a lot up to get him.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he gets there, the 49ers are like, okay, just so you know, you're not going to be starting for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, because John Brody's there, who's an all-pro.
Yeah.
He was a hell of a quarterback in the 60s.
It just felt like a draft that was incorrect for the 49ers, where you're like, why are you picking up this young quarterback when you have a guy who's in his prime, who's about to just keep going?
And he's not old or anything.
No,
or
that's
decrepit.
yeah.
Yeah. I did want to add about that draft. Bob Greasy and Floyd Little were also picked in there. They were Hall of Famer. You know who the number 1 pick was?
No.
Bubba Smith out of Michigan State.
Ooh.
Defensive tackle. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but he played Hightower in Police Academy.
Oh, damn. I do know who that is.
Along with the guy that didn't invent the printing press. So he was a backup to Brody. From 67 to 71, he only makes 6 starts. And he's the punter.
And I was going to say, he took over as the punter, but what he said was because they came in and were like, you're not going to be starting for 4 or 5 years, he goes, it really killed my motivation. And then his quote was, I was never an ambitious player. So like he just didn't have that, oh, I'm just going to sit here for 4 years. It really like took a toll on him to be like, dude, we got someone better, and he never really put it together as a quarterback in San Francisco.
Oh, no, for sure. And there are guys like that where it's like you need to be the guy. Otherwise, you're like, well, fuck all. Why am I doing this?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And it's not like where it's Brett Favre where he's drinking himself into oblivion and sending pictures and looking at Gruden emails. This is just like, well, if I'm not going to go in, what the hell do you want from me?
Yes. Why did you draft me? Why did you trade up to draft me? It just, it didn't make sense. And he was very distraught by this and just felt like the 49ers just made a mistake.
And he had flashes. Like in 72, he went 6-1-1 with 16 touchdowns. And then they turned to Brody again. He did that year beat Dallas at Texas Stadium on Thanksgiving, which had to be very nice.
I did want to bring this up because he beat Dallas, got them into the playoffs. First playoff game was against Dallas, and they decided to have Brody start, and he threw 2 interceptions in a loss.
Yeah.
And that's what people were saying. They were just like, why don't we just stick with him? Why can't we just
pick a guy?
Just pick a guy.
Just pick a guy. In 73, he started against Minnesota and had 31 completions, which was a team record at the time, and ended up losing. But then they ended up going with the third stringer after he had a bad outing. So it's I always wonder why the hell it never, because I was always like, he won the Heisman Trophy. Did he just suck in the NFL? And you're like, he never really got a chance.
Yes, that was the big thing. They didn't just like back him like you're our number 1 quarterback no matter what happens.
74, he was supposed to be the starter, but he dislocated his shoulder.
Yep, in a preseason game, which knocked him out for the entire season, and then he re-aggravated it in a car crash.
Yeah.
Which you're like, that is just bad luck. Because 74 was supposed to be, even though it's crazy to think of like, oh, he won the Heisman in 66. Now we're going to see him in 74 for the first time as a starter. But it just, everything, he just had that bad luck in the NFL.
And you can't blame him because it's not like he was like a total like fuck up.
No,
it's not like a Johnny Manziel situation.
Yeah.
It's just like, dude, sometimes your number's just not called.
Yep.
So 75, bit of a rough season. And by that point, after the year, the Niners have traded for Jim Plunkett.
Yep.
To be their new quarterback. And April 2nd, 1976, he's traded for wide receiver Willie McGee and linebacker Bruce Aaliyah and a second-round pick to the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers for one sole reason, to sell tickets.
I was just going to say, so there's a lot of hype with this because he is a Florida guy.
He's Florida man.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to put that label on him.
Steve is Florida man without the bath salts. He's fun Florida man, not this has gotten...
Let me tell you something, Steve. But going to Tampa Bay, there was a lot of hype behind him, and then you get the worst season ever.
And his head coach, John McKay, who had come from USC, where all they did was run.
Because
that's tailback you.
Yep.
Like the guy who originated it coming to the NFL with a crappy expansion team.
Yes.
Like, you remember when we talked about Brunell and how, like, much the Jaguars were helped at the beginning?
Yeah.
Them in Carolina were specifically, the help that they received was specifically because of Tampa Bay and Seattle.
Because they were so bad. And the thing that they said was they weren't even like overall a bad team. They were just like, they were huge, just like missing pieces of straight up professional players where they were like, we don't have cornerbacks that are pros. You know what I mean? It was very much like, we're going to take these amateurs. I hope you guys are going to pull us through.
Starting at middle linebacker, the guy that just caulked our locker room.
Exactly.
So he's the starter. He goes 0-12 on that 0-14 team.
Yep.
And after the year, he's had it with McKay because he wants to pass and he doesn't.
And there's no pass protection.
No,
That was
oh
the other
God,
thing.
no. There's
There
no
was
pass protection.
There was like negative pass protection, if you would. So he was getting the shit kicked out of him.
The linemen were pushing the guys into the quarterback.
Yeah, and they were losing, and he knew that this wasn't the type of offense that he would actually do well in.
No, for sure. So he's cutting 77, and then he tries to catch on with both Denver and Miami.
Yep.
And by that point, unable to make the team. He's 32 years old. Did want to bring up before we discuss his coaching career, won 13 games in the NFL, almost a 52% completion percentage, over 6,800 yards passing, and 40 touchdowns. Which
So not bad at all, but never given the shot. And I feel like his coaching career and his playing career are so similar that it's weird.
Yeah.
Because I feel like he didn't get a good shot as a coach, which we'll talk about in the NFL. And it was almost the exact same as him as a player.
But you know what? College is where he shines.
Oh my God. He is a college god.
So in 1978, he's hired by head coach Doug Dickey at Florida.
Who he said he forever will be grateful for because he hired him without any coaching experience, but he knew what a great quarterback, and that's what he came in as like offensive coordinator, quarterback, coach kind of thing.
Yeah, so they were switching their offense from like
Yep.
basically an option run-heavy offense to a passing one.
Yep.
So he was there to help install it. Actually, Chris Collinsworth switched from quarterback to wide receiver at this point because they're like, oh, we're going to throw the ball more than 3 times a game.
Yep.
So he was and helped him make all SEC. They only go 4-7 because of the transition, and Dickey was fired, and Charlie Pell took over as head coach, and Spurrier was out of the job.
Yeah,
after
so
1 year. Florida.
I was going to say, so it was 1 year as assistant coach, but I feel like other programs that were like, we need to stop doing the wishbone. Yeah. It's not working. We want to have a more pass-heavy offense. So they were like, he can do it.
Yeah, he seemed to do it when he played.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
He won a Heisman Trophy, for Christ's sake. So 79, he goes to Georgia Tech. He was a Florida's. Pepper Rogers was the head coach. He was an assistant when Spurrier had played there.
Oh, okay.
Over at Florida. They started 1-5-1, and Spurrier was asked to call the plays and make up the game plans. And all of a sudden, Georgia Tech's offense started to get better, and they started winning some games. So they ended up losing to Georgia in their season finale, and Rogers was fired. And the new head coach, Bill Curry, told Spurrier, you'll be in the running to stay.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep you. So Spurrier's like, well, fuck all.
Yep.
Like...
So, this is what I find interesting about the start of his career because
he keeps Curry in mind down the road. I'll tell you what.
He's assistant coach, Florida, Georgia Tech, and both of them look like they were like, we're changing for the better. And then every time a new coach comes in, they're just like, get out of here. We don't want anything to do with this change. Change. So he goes to Duke.
Yep,
and now
he's offensive coordinator.
Now he's offensive coordinator at Duke. And then this is one of my favorite quotes was, I forgot who the coach was, the head coach.
Red Wilson.
Red Wilson. They did a 60-yard halfback option play.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
It's the first time that he's ever seen.
Yes.
He just looks at him and he goes, what was that, to Steve Spurrier? And he just goes, a touchdown.
Touchdown, coach.
It's so great where you're like, I feel like he did have that confidence like, no, you guys aren't doing the offense correctly.
Yeah, because he designed the offense, he coached the quarterbacks, and he called all of the plays.
Yes.
Ben Bennett set NCAA career records for passing yards. Chris Castor, the wide receiver, was ACC Player of the Year and first team All ACC. Like, granted, they upset Tennessee and Knoxville in '82.
Yep.
I wanted to bring up. But, like, everywhere he goes, there's improvement. And he's bringing a more pass-happy type of offensive scheme to places that have never fucking seen it before.
No, they would just literally run the ball into the dirt. And for like his credit too, Duke was and is not known for like a strong football program. This was one of their best seasons. We'll get into their best season later.
Yep. So because of how well he does, the next 3 seasons, he's a head coach in the USFL. And
Tampa Bay.
Which I bet you if you lined up the Tampa Bay Bandits against the Tampa Bay Bucks of that era, they probably would have beat the hell out of them.
That was the biggest thing that they said was going around in like the Tampa newspaper, where the Bandits just look better and they're more fun to watch than the Bucks ever are going to be.
And it was bandit ball is what they called it. And it was like they were one of the more exciting teams in the USFL. And if there had been a league merger, who knows? Maybe the Bucks fold up shop and you just Tampa Bandits. This is your town now. Like, we don't need any of those creamsicle uniforms with Johnny Depp on the helmet. So, 86, the league it folds because they tried to move it to the fall, and he's kind of disillusioned at this point because he's passed over at both Mississippi State and LSU. So in 1987, he's hired by Duke as their head coach and offensive coordinator, and this might be the best era of Duke football in history.
Yes. And this is also because this is when he's the head coach. It's college, so you have these rivalries. And this is when you start seeing him really mess with his opponents.
Oh, I love it.
Which is my favorite thing about him because, God, does he like to needle people.
And he does it in a fun way.
He does it it's a cheeky shenanigans. It's not evil shenanigans.
It's not even mean. It's just him like, this is pretty funny.
Yes. No, literally. I could see him saying that to his players like, that would be fun, wouldn't it?
So from 87 to 89, they go 20-13-1. They win the ACC for the 89.
Yeah.
They're 8-3 that year, and they end up losing the All-American Bowl to Texas Tech. The issue was, though, he's gone. He had left. I mean, he coaches the game, but he had told them beforehand.
I was going to say,
happen.
So he had already got his next job, which was going to be at Florida. He had already agreed to it, and he told his players the night before this game, which he says he was like, that was a huge mistake on my end. I really thought it would rally them and be like, this is the last game we're playing. They played like shit.
Oh, for sure. And they always beat North Carolina in football.
I wanted to say this about the North Carolina because they went 3-0 against them, and one time they all took a team picture in front of North Carolina's scoreboard just to mess with them.
Oh, yeah.
Just for some cheeky fun.
So on December 31st, 1989, he is hired as the head coach at Florida, which had to be like a dream job for him.
Yes.
And he's entering, as we discussed in our Emmitt Smith episode, this is not a great place to be. Granted, they've been building back up with guys like Emmitt Smith, but they're going to be on probation that first year.
I was just going to say they're coming off of, this is why he got the job so early when he was still coaching at Duke, because they had to fire their last head coach, Florida, because he had so many infractions that they were like, dude, like, what is going on here? So, like, he got the job early on. Florida's going to be dealing with some punishments, and he comes in and he's like, no, I'm going to turn this program around. Well, not even turn it around, but keep it going the way it was.
He's a culture guy.
Yes.
Like, so when he got there, new blue jersey. He puts grass on their
instead
home
of the
field.
Artificial turf.
And the reason Emmitt Smith left, which he should have, is I'm going to throw the ball all around this conference where everybody runs it.
Yep.
Everybody's stuck in the Stone Age, but I've got an actual plan in place.
Yep.
He had what was it? They had not won an official conference title in 83 years of playing football.
And then literally the 90s for Florida Gators are such a, if you grew up in that, you just know them as a football powerhouse. They were not that. Like, it's so interesting outside of like, when he was playing, essentially, and then he comes back and coaches and then really takes them to one of the best programs.
Imagine being like Mississippi State or LSU at this time and just being like, what could have been? I don't know, you could throw the ball that many times.
Yeah. Don't we got a rule against that?
That's Steamy Spurrier. All he does is throw touchdowns and crap his britches.
You gotta see this guy. He's just crapping his britches.
Steamy rave. So 1990, they go 9-2, but they have the postseason and television bans. So which still, you're 9-2.
Yeah, you're still 9-2.
And I think one of the big things I did want to bring up is when you see a guy who's successful at a place like Duke, where undergraduate enrollment is low just to begin with, then with the academic type of stuff, but you're still rolling up W's. Now you get to go to a football crazed school where you have everything at your disposal, and it's just like, oh, well, keep the scoreboard running. Like, it's crazy.
And he was also, this was the thing that literally in the early 90s, because people weren't because college recruiting at that time was very like regional.
Yes.
And people were saying, they were like, dude, he almost had like open pick because nobody was going after these passing quarterbacks, these really good wide receivers. They were also focused on getting the best running back that he was like, I'm just going to take all of these other players.
And it's not like the quarterbacks that he had were like
unbelievable,
lights out NFL studs. It was just, he basically just recruited Ty Detmers.
No, seriously,
Like,
that's really good. Because
I don't mean to disrespect any of the guys that we'll talk about, but it's like he was not getting first round pick type quarterbacks, just guys. This is how the offense works. Make your reads, be smart.
Smart quarterbacks.
With the fun and gun offense.
Oh, I love that one.
So in 91, they win the SEC. They go 10-2 with Shane Matthews as their quarterback. They had nasty defenses too.
Yes.
On those teams.
I feel like that sometimes gets overlooked, that he did get a really great defense almost every year. Because everybody looks at him as like this guy that changed the way the offense was in the SEC and all that shit. And you're just like, no. Their defenses were really good.
Oh, I mean, guys like Kevin Carter and shit, those guys were studs.
Yeah.
So 91, they win the SEC. They go to the Sugar Bowl. He had a nice quote about this before the game. I don't know if you read it. Notre Dame, I think, was like 8-3-1.
Okay.
Going into it, and he had joked before the game, what's the difference between Notre Dame and Cheerios? And everyone's like, what? And he's like, Cheerios actually belong in a bowl.
I do remember that one. I forgot it until you said, what's the difference? His quotes, this is what I want from a head coach.
Yeah.
This is what I want.
There's like no malice. It's just like, yeah, I think we're better. And then this was the Jerome Bettis game.
Yeah.
The one where they wore the green numbered jerseys and he ran for all those touchdowns. So they lost 39-28, but 10 wins.
Yeah.
Year two. 92, they win the SEC East because the conference has expanded. Eric Rett tearing it up. They ended up losing the SEC title, though, to Alabama in that great game in Birmingham. Win the Gator Bowl. And then 93-94, 21-4-1. They won the SEC both years. They won the Sugar Bowl 93. They lost it in 94.
Yep.
But 94, they kind of let it get away. That one tie was the Choke-A-Doke game where they blew that. Humongous league. Warwick Dunn was a hero in that one. Go listen to that episode. 95, even better. Now
I was going to say,
now
we get maybe into his best seasons at Florida, which are 95 and 96.
Yeah, so they had they won the SEC title that year. They scored over 28 points, I think, in all their games or something like that. They were 12-0. They go to the Fiesta Bowl to play Nebraska.
For the national champ.
And, well, go listen to episode 21. That was the Big Red Machine.
Yeah.
I mean, oh no, Lawrence Phillips is beating people. This Amon Green guy is pretty good. Like, they lost 62-24.
Which is crazy because literally a 12-0 team, but they were just overpowered in that game.
That might be a top 3 all-time team in the 20th century. That 95 Nebraska squad.
Yep.
But 96, got Werfel again, who hasn't won the Heisman. Not only were you your school's first Heisman winner, you coached up the next one.
And he's the first ever Heisman winner to coach a Heisman winner.
Yeah.
So, like, it really is kind of amazing at his alma mater, which is so much better that he was at Florida to win, and then he's like, this guy's going to win it too.
So they're stacked on offense. You got guys who played in the NFL like Ike Hilliard, Reedell Anthony, Jacquez Green. They start 10-0.
Yep.
They won the SEC, but November 30th, 96, they play Florida State in their annual rivalry game. This is a 1-2 in the regular season.
And
that didn't happen often in those days.
No, it didn't. What was he calling Florida State? Because I think that one might be my favorite.
We discussed it
I
kind of
know.
in our Peter Warwick
I
episode.
know.
What did he call him, Chris?
Free shoe, and this is what I read it as, is Free Shoe U, like Free Shoe University, as in FSU, because they... And just messing with these players, essentially, I bet in the Florida locker room, it probably brought everybody together so much. Like, that is hilarious.
Oh, you mean the college that was just for girls until Burt Reynolds got there?
Oh, God.
Oh, it must be Burt Reynolds or something.
It must be Burt Reynolds or something.
I mean, technically, they did get a lot of shoes.
Yeah.
Like, so, at discounted prices at that old Dillard's.
That's true.
This was at Doak Campbell Stadium there, though, in Tallahassee, and they lost.
Yeah, they lost against FSU.
They didn't drop that far, and due to what happened championship weekend and then bowl weekend, I think they dropped to like 4 or 5.
Yep.
So what had ended up happening was Arizona State, because of the old conference tie-ins, they played in the Rose Bowl, and they were undefeated. They lost to Ohio State, who had lost to Michigan, which screwed them over. And Nebraska had crawled from that early loss to ASU to the Big 12 title game. If they win, they're going to win the national championship.
Yep.
But they lost to Priest Holmes and Ricky Williams in Texas. So when the Sugar Bowl rolls around and the rematch comes, winner take all.
Winner take all.
Florida
Yeah,
State,
exactly.
Which had
is
to
wild.
be sweeter.
Yes.
So January 2nd, 1997, they play Florida State there in New Orleans, and they beat the absolute brakes off of them.
I was going to say, they really dominated this game. Like, I imagine Steve was like, no, we're running up the score.
Yo,
I don't care. We're running up this score.
we're running up the score so that they'll have to buy shoes. They lost a lot of players, though, after this year.
Yeah. It was a bit of a decline.
And going in, I feel like we should talk about, before we go into 97, just because of what happens, the Tennessee rivalry is hit full blast now between Tennessee and Florida because they're in the SEC East together, and now Tennessee has Peyton Manning.
Yep.
And what Tennessee can't do is beat Florida. And Spurrier has a lot of fun with them.
Well, the quote that I loved,
Yes.
that he was just needling Peyton Manning was, so Peyton, was it the Sugar Bowl? No, it was
the second or third place team in the SEC goes to the Citrus Bowl.
The Citrus Bowl, that's what it was. Because he was like, Peyton Manning coming back for his senior season so he can do back-to-back MVPs at the Citrus Bowl, which was there's so many levels to that one.
Yes.
Where it's like, you guys aren't going to play in the Sugar Bowl. Also, on top of that, he's coming back to be the MVP of this. Like,
yeah,
it was
this meaningful bowl game.
Yes, because we keep beating you guys.
His other one was, you can't spell citrus without UT. Oh, you wanted me to play basketball? Well, I'm holding on to this grudge for a bit. But I'm going to make it fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it fun.
That's what I mean. It was constantly fun from him.
So they had a very up and down year. They lost to both LSU and Georgia.
Yep.
No SEC title game that year. But they did beat number 1 Florida State that year. They were rotating quarterbacks, actually, this entire year. And then they go to the Citrus. They have to play in the Citrus Bowl. Because Tennessee played in the Orange Bowl and got just ass blasted by Nebraska.
Yep.
They beat Penn State 21-6. And it is amazing the amount of 10-plus win seasons he's able to roll off in a row here.
At Florida, I think he was holding the record for consecutive 10-win seasons. Mm-hmm. And it's, the powerhouse that he was in Florida is kind of crazy.
So the next 2 years, they go 19-6. 98, they win the Orange Bowl against the guy from the Cosby Show in Syracuse. 99, they lose the Citrus Bowl against Michigan State because Plexico Burress lost his fucking mind in that game. And then the next 2 years, they're really good because Rex Grossman's their quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
They go 20-5 between the 2 years. They won an SEC title in 2000. They lost that Sugar Bowl they played against Miami was a joke, though. Miami just
destroyed them.
It was bad. The following year, they beat Maryland by 33 points in the Orange Bowl. And you're thinking, my God, he could keep coaching more He's an icon. He
Yep.
nicknamed the stadium the Swamp.
Yeah, so he gave them their nickname to where, like, when teams go, they're like, we're going to the Swamp, which is such a great thing to do. But this is why I actually really love Steve. Was I think it was 2001. He just goes, I've been the coach of Florida for 12 years. I think that's enough time to be a coach at a program.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
He was talking about that, where it's like, I could do more, but I feel like 12 years is enough.
And the types of guys that he was sending to the NFL, like a Fred Taylor or a Javon Curse, Alex Brown, those guys were good for a long time.
Yep.
I did want to bring up, though, at Florida, he won a national championship, 6 SEC titles.
Which I wanted to point this out. That's an SEC title for every other year that he coached. So he was 50% on SEC titles with Florida.
You know how many they had in the 83 years before?
Zero.
5-time coach of the year for the SEC. He had a Heisman winner, 9+ wins in 12 seasons, which at the time only 3 guys had done that. Top 15 in each of his 12 seasons.
Yep.
So like every year post that kind of first season where you're, postseason ban, you're in the national title conversation.
Every year.
Every single year. But he ends up resigning his post.
I do want to say they went in Florida. He was 122 wins, 27 losses, and 1 tie. That record alone just like proves how much of a winning culture it was.
I bet you that tie still gets to him, though.
Oh,
that
God.
Florida State game.
Yep.
That fucking Danny Cannell. God damn. Bob Barker. So he sees another option.
Yep.
And, well, much like his playing career in the NFL, it really doesn't break his way. Some of it's his fault. Other parts of it aren't.
Yep.
And where does he go, Chris?
So
in
he
2002?
signs, and this is what I want to say, because there were some people saying that he went for the money, which he talks about later in life, where he signs a 5-year, $25 million contract with the Comanches. I'm sorry, the Redskins at the time.
Washington Redskins, go fuck yourself.
With the Redskins at the time, which was by far the highest paid coach. So like it was kind of like when people saw that contract, they were like, oh yeah, he's going for the money.
They weren't paying coaches like that.
No.
In that era.
No.
Not $5 million a season. I mean, granted, it's rare you see guys even get 5-year contracts now.
Yes.
But let's just say he's getting a 5-year contract with any other, well, I won't say any other, but like 80% of the league. Okay, that makes sense. There's some stability. Daniel Snyder owns the Redskins at this point. Worst owner in professional sports. Maybe Donald Sterling might have a few things to say, but
Owner and GM.
Yes.
So he has too much control.
and this is he would have been the 3rd coach in 3 seasons because Norv Turner got fired after 2000. Marty Schottenheimer coached in 2001, and after the year he said, "I want more control," and Snyder told him no. So he just up and left.
Yep.
Which this is why I do kind of blame Steve. Like, why?
Yeah, you saw
what's going to happen. It's like with Shanahan when he went to Washington,
Yes.
or even with the Raiders. Like, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense.
No.
He tries stacking his roster with a bunch of old Gators. I remember that.
And he brought a bunch of guys from his coaching staff, that's common.
The staff part I get, but don't be rolling Werfel and Matthews out there.
Yeah.
Like that's not a recipe.
No.
They ended up picking Patrick Ramsey at 32 overall, the guy who's Mark Brunell's job.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Brunell took his job. They go 7-9 in 2002. 2003, they start 2-0.
And then, oof.
Oh, boy. It is... Suffice it to say, they won only 3 of their last 14 games.
Well, I feel like, and a lot of people were talking about how his style of play, even though it's like a pro style passing, didn't work in the NFL because they would just blitz the shit out of him and really take away his passing game. But I also feel like there just wasn't that cohesion with him in the front office to where they were like, we need these players to run this system. And it was more like, no, we're just picking up players.
They never got their quarterback.
Nope.
And the front office and ownership was a tire fire.
Yep.
And he had enough by the end of 2000. He walked away from $15 million.
That was what I wanted to say, where people were like, well, he was chasing the money. He literally, instead of getting fired, resigned and gave up his last 3 years of so much money.
That's not doing it for the money, in my opinion. Because he could have just stayed there while they were like pathetically below mid and collected a paycheck. But he didn't.
Well, he said he was like, I want to apologize to the Redskins fans, but I was doing a lousy job. Our GM was doing a lousy job, and he was the owner. One of us had to go. You can guess which one.
Dude, that's all I'm going to say is the 30 for 30 that they're going to do on Snyder, Vinny Serrato, and Bruce Allen. Because that is why I think those Gruden emails came to light, where he was the scapegoat for everything.
Yeah.
Because they were digging. Granted, you shouldn't use those types of words, but I think the actual rot was so much further down.
Yep.
So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But his Redskins tenure is over after 2003.
But like we said, it was like his playing career, where I felt like he just didn't get an accurate or just like a really good attempt at an NFL career as player and coach. Yeah. You know, like he wasn't given the chance in the 49ers. He went to the Reds, which that was his fault.
No, yes. You know exactly what you're walking into.
Yes.
But he's out of football in 2004, but in 2005, he's actually up for the Florida vacancy after Ron Zook leaves. But there's another vacancy that's open in the SEC East as well.
So everybody thought he was going to that region of college
he's the old
football.
Ball coach.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
A lot of people thought he was going to take over the Florida job again. And I was very, like, reading back on this, you're like, that was kind of a surprising move, where he goes to the Gamecocks.
Yeah, he goes to South Carolina.
My favorite mascot.
The Cox.
The Cox.
The Cox. So he signs November 23rd for 7 years and $8.75 million. And Lou Holtz got them back to respectability.
Yes.
But what you'll see over this next decade is South Carolina fielded some pretty damn good squads over the next 10 years.
3 years, they were top 5 team in the nation. You know what I mean? Like 3 of those years where you're like, you're just going to see Gamecocks and be like, oh, damn it.
So his first year in 2005, his first win at South Carolina in Knoxville that year. And then against 12th ranked Florida, they hadn't beaten them since 1939.
I was going to say that one was so good, especially not taking the Florida job and then going and being like, well, like, it was me, guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
remember the Charlie Pell era that ended in disaster and all the wonderment that took place afterwards? I'm still here, guys.
I'm still here.
2006, he's inducted into the Ring of Honor at Florida because obviously
one of the first in the first run of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
He signs an extension through the year 2012 there in 2007. They're basically like an 8-win team his first few years out of the gate, which, considering what the SEC was at that time, that's pretty damn good.
Yes.
It's pretty damn good. He in 2008, he records his 100th SEC win against Kentucky, which had to be pretty awesome for him. 2009, they upset number 4 Ole Miss.
Oh, yeah.
Which was
good.
their first victory over a top 5 team.
Yeah. First victory over a top 5 team. And yeah.
Well, and if you think about it, South Carolina's only been in the SEC for about 10, 15 years at this point. They had been an ACC. The reason they have that championship game in 92 is because they added them in Arkansas to the conference. So 2010, this might have been his best year.
Yep.
They upset number 1 Alabama. They have their first win at the Swamp. They sweep November that year with their Orange Crush schedule of Tennessee, Florida, and Clemson. And he's SEC Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
That year, they won their first SEC East title and made it all the way to the championship. Granted, they lost Cam Newton. But they finished 22nd that year. In 2011, he beat all of the SEC East teams.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And these are more 10-win seasons.
Yes.
Just to put it in perspective, because a 10-win season is like so good if you're a college football team, and he strings together 3 of them in South Carolina. That was what I feel like the emphasis isn't on enough, because he really goes to these places and really maximizes the potential that these guys have.
Well, and you have like studs in the program at this time, like a Jared Cook or an Alshon Jeffrey or a Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, what's his nuts? Who was Defensive Player of the Year? Stephon Gilmore is there while Spurrier's there. Like, he's getting the Florida type athletes now at South Carolina during his tenure.
That was such a big thing back then. Was can you find these guys who are going to become mega stars? And he obviously could.
Oh yeah. They beat Michigan State in 2012, or Michigan in the Outback Bowl in 2012. That was that Jadeveon Clowney sizzle reel game.
Yeah.
They finished 7th in the coaches poll that year at 11-2, and then 2013 they're 11-2 again.
Yep.
They beat 3 top 10 teams. 4th in the AP poll,
and they're just coming off of beating their first top 5 team. Do you know what I mean? That was like the change that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. Was they weren't a powerhouse, and now when the Gamecocks come to town, you're just like, this is bad.
You're a winner, Steve Spurrier. You're a winner in the SEC.
He really
when
is.
You peak, you're going to peak so the entire Dixie feels it.
Steve, if you peak, can you do it in your room, please?
Mom.
2014,
they only go 7-6.
Yeah.
And then by 2015, he ends up resigning about halfway through the season on October 12th. He basically left in his wake a totally redone program.
Yes.
At South Carolina, where like winning was not like, hey, let's celebrate. It was expected.
Yes.
It was expected. That's what I am so fascinated by with him. Everywhere he goes, he wins football games in college.
Yes,
college.
Very true. Very true. Because he really does make these programs have this winning mentality to where if they do have like a 7-6 season, they're like, that was bad. That wasn't our thing. You know what I mean? And it's very impressive, and he probably is one of the best coaches in his era in college football.
Oh yeah.
I hate that we have to keep saying that because the Redskins was so bad, but that wasn't entirely his fault.
It's like Shanahan. You have that middle sandwich that's just so wonderful. And then the pieces of bread are just literal human shit.
Yes. It's not a shit sandwich because the bread is the shit, but yes.
So in April 2018, he's coaching again the Orlando Apollos of the Alliance of American Football. Called it a mulligan in life, and they were the best team in the league.
And they were the best team in the league.
Until it folded.
Yep.
He called them. He called themselves regular season champions. Which he just wanted to show that he could still coach and do it with the best of them, which awesome.
I love.
2016, they named it Steve Spurrier Florida Field at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. So, I mean,
justified.
Completely justified.
Yeah, I love it.
They was given the Order of the Palmetto by the South Carolina governor. So it's not just Florida where he's the man.
Yeah. Florida and South Carolina where he is just known to be a winner.
Yeah, he's a winner. So in 2017, College Football Hall of Fame. What more can you say about a guy who won a Heisman Trophy, a national championship? He was 7-time SEC Coach of the Year because he won it twice at South Carolina.
Yep.
2-time ACC Coach of the Year with Duke. And a natty, 228 wins as a college coach.
Yeah.
He was a winner in all. He was 11-10 in his bowl. And mind you, these bowl games that he's in, they're top 10 matchups most of the time.
Yes.
Like, it's not, the Maxi Tampon Bowl.
Yes,
it's like
exactly.
the Orange Bowl, the friggin' Sugar Bowl.
Yeah.
But, Steve Spurrier, unbelievable.
I was going to say, he was such a winner, and something that I think is really a great legacy for him is he made these programs into be viable. Like Florida obviously was still, but like South Carolina, you didn't know anything about. He had the best years at Duke. He was there for 2 years.
3
it's
years.
yeah, it's crazy. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, Steve Spurrier, man, he was so good.
Old ball coach.